kind of going back to what you first mentioned was about how you've traveled to so many places. So how has that sort of shaped like how you work or the person you are, maybe in both your professional and personal life, or maybe just one of them?
What it does is, I think, especially I live in Maine. Okay, I used to live in New York City for 20 years, and so that was, and I still love that place to death. But I live here, and it's quiet here, and it's seasonal, and it's just you can withdraw, you can be complacent. With all of the remote work people are doing post-secondary education and post-college, working from their offices and stuff. Those are bubbles. It's easy for me to like fall back into I'm in the woods here in Maine and I'm doing my thing on the computer. But the next thing you know, I'm a week ago I was in Kenya, in the refugee camp. And so those just slap you in the face. And it's so healthy and it's so great that you're just suddenly out of your comfort zone with cultures that don't necessarily understand your sense of humor. And I'm always in this place where, right now we just developed this radio game show. Part of it's based on some American games. I don't know if they're going to fly there. I don't know if the sensibility and the snap, the pace that I have in my mind is going to be the pace at which they work. And so that's just fascinating, and as long as you're open to it, and part of our training is we are there to work with whatever local population is. There's usually only one American involved or two max. And our expertise is what I've just described, but the stories still need to be written by them, the characters developed by them. Everything's got to kind of work through their sensibility. And that's where I learn is what is that sensibility? And also finding that, oh my God, how is it that we do have the same sense of humor? Me here in Maine and them at the Kakuma refugee camp having fled South Sudan. How does that happen? So that commonality is also just very thrilling.
So, what do you think was like your favorite or most impactful place that you traveled to?
Iraq.
Really?
Yeah.
Why so?
Because when we went there, it was post the US invasion under W. Bush. There was a ton of money pouring into that country, a lot of it mishandled. But there was this sense of optimism. There was this sense of, oh my God, we're going to become a democracy kind of thing going on. But within that clashes with the traditional Islamic culture there, which is not about that. And that culture tends to marginalize adolescence. It's just not really an important time period. You're either a kid or you're marriageable, and the time in between is not well studied, it's not well respected. And so we come along at this time, which is kind of, it's beginning to shatter, not shatter is the wrong word, but is beginning to question some of that very traditional kind of way forward. And we bring these kids up to Erbil, which is the Kurdish part, and they were like, and gave them a voice. It was basically a reality game show that involved digital storytelling, performing, a physical challenge and a mental challenge. And no one had ever asked them anything. No one ever wanted to hear their stories or have them create a story. And so they went crazy. They had such a good time. They learned so much. They ate up every single thing we kind of threw their way. And we had 3 seasons of this series. And that level of like, hear me, I have something to say, let me roar, was just visceral, in a very, very, very challenged culture, which then kind of descended on itself and continues to be mired in, incredible difficulties. But I love that place, and I love the youth, and I love this one little tiny window that we gave them, and they just jumped all over it.
Yeah,
Cool.
no, it's so wonderful, like how many lives like you're able to impact with things like that. So do you think being able to go to these countries and give those kids the opportunity sort of been the thing that's always inspired you to work with children, especially in the education side of it, or did it maybe start somewhere else and kind of become like this different sort of inspiration?
No, I always knew the initial, it's an interesting question. I've never really thought about it. The initial thrust was I was a theater major in college, and what I loved about it, I wasn't an actor, but what I loved about it was this: there's a costume designer, there's a director, there's a writer, there are the actors, there's the lighting people, and you all came together to create something. And so when moving to New York City, so then I go into teaching, so I'm kind of doing the youth thing, and I discovered, yeah, I love working with, in that case, 9th through 12th graders, another favorite age. Loved working with those kids, but there I was in this school in Virginia, trying to teach them connections between literature we were reading in real life, and I had never really been in real life. It's like, how can I make these connections on behalf of these kids? And I've never been out there. So I moved to New York, knew that I loved the theater process, and then kind of like, what is like theater without me going to theater? Because there was no money to be made in theater. It was just like, oh, it was all like down the East Village and people in like little basements putting on, performances for 5 other people that showed up. Wasn't the world I wanted, but television was, because it was the same thing. It was writers and directors and choreographers and all these people coming together. That was the initial draw to all of this, was all of that kind of creative collaboration. Then at Sesame, it was always with a target audience of kids. I was not usually in the preschool. I was not usually on Sesame Street per se. I was on these kind of other programs, so the PBS programs like Ghostwriter, 3-to-1 Contact, Squirrel on TV, that they produced that were targeting kind of 8 to 12-year-olds. So began there, but then segued into
like sort of
I love working with youth.
Yeah. So like was like sort of working with Sesame, like did you enjoy that, and like what was sort of your favorite part about that?
What I did there was I was in domestic production at first. So I kind of learned the production skills of a production manager and a production assistant, an associate producer, all of these kind of levels of what does it take to produce a TV show, including, and very importantly, the budget side of it all. If you understand the details of the budgets and the unions and all those pieces, then you kind of get television. You can kind of do anything. But within that industry, people will pigeonhole you as a numbers guy. Like, oh, he's a production manager, he can manage the budget, he can make sure everyone's paid and keep us on budget and stuff. And then if you don't break out of that quickly, you're stuck there. But it's the best skill to have in the world. I then was able to move over to the international department by a fluke circumstance. And they do all these international Sesame Street productions, where they go to Portugal, and they went to Norway at the time, and they go to Brazil, and they go to South Africa, and they go all over the world and create localized versions of Sesame Street. That was not really my thing. I moved into this department, they didn't quite know what to do with me, so all of the other programs that the workshop had created were given to me, and that's how I started working with the youth. So I was this little outlier guy, kind of running around the world doing science shows and literacy shows and mathematics shows, which led to time with the U.S. Institute of Peace. And that's where it became much more about kind of social change, kind of developing media for social change, and less, it's a literacy curriculum or it's a mathematical curriculum. That's where I've been hanging out for the past 15 years. As I moved away from Sesame Workshop and into U.S. Institute of Peace and Peace Tech Lab and Search for Common Ground, these are all organizations out of DC that are very much about developing media for social change. Whether it's coexistence and tolerance, gender equity, it's a wide variety of issues.